Hello, how are you? I thought would
On there?
attend virtually.
I got childcare today. Yeah.
Oh.
Hang on just a minute.
Hello. What are you looking for? Hi, Barbara. Hi, how are you? You're looking for,
Alan,
he's not here yet.
okay,
Alan Mace?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not here.
his sidekick.
Okay. Well, have a seat. He said he had a meeting
Yes,
prior to this. He was
Me
gonna
too.
try and come in person. If not, he would join virtually, but he did say he was gonna try and make it in
whatever
person.
he says, I say, right.
Okay. It's like, he's written. You hear him writing, did you?
Well, I talked to him on various other things, and I didn't hear if he
But
wasn't
that he
coming.
wasn't going to be here, right?
That's somebody's signature before yours.
That right there? I don't think so.
Okay. So am I there or no? I just choose down, okay.
Okay. Yes.
I keep pressing, going to the camera, and it's not letting me.
You don't need to be on here in order for this to work, does it? Yeah. That's 6:30. I need two more people.
I wonder if because I'm co-host, I can't use the camera, but I can't see everything. All I see on my laptop is.
Right. You think we run it?
I don't see you.
Hello,
Hi.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. I'm
Alan, hi, Alan.
Smart.
No, I haven't picked up.
I think it's stuck.
It's stuck in the
Yeah.
table.
Well, if you're reading, that might just. Suddenly,
Everybody.
Hi.
Yeah, if you leave, let's see what happens.
You know, I figured everything out. Because my brain works that way.
Well, the only thing is, the agenda is right there, but the attachments were, it's not.
It's so freaking. It's still.
Yeah, I kind of space, I always space when I do
The only thing that was the rest.
You look at it on your phone.
Yeah.
my car.
Study.
There's no copy.
It's still some live on
I
YouTube.
can get it for you on the phone, look at it.
Yeah.
That's the main topic of the trailer.
I can't see who else is in here.
Oh,
Oh,
thank you.
thank you.
I'll give it back though.
Do you have more vouchers? He's still awaiting signature.
Oh, I can do it now.
Right.
20 degrees cooler in here than it is in, which is.
You just dropped them.
Yeah, it does.
You think it'd be warmer out here, right?
Oh, all right, so I guess it's fine. I mean, I can see it on the big screen.
Okay, Rennie says he's on his way, he'll be late.
I can still,
Okay, get here, because we can't start without you.
Michael's
I
not
need
here?
one more.
I'm
Michael's not here
yeah.
I'm filling in for my.
All right, it says it's recording, so we're good. Alrighty, enjoy. Bye.
The, Sojourner Truth program, it was incredible.
At the courthouse, was it? Oh, good, my daughter went, and I asked her how it was.
She didn't think it was.
Well, she was like, it was okay, she was like, it's just a bunch of county people talking.
I mean,
I love it.
I almost cried when I looked at the documents, so I
Oh,
was
yeah,
taking
that's great.
pictures and sending them to my friends and,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that.
Yeah, well, she doesn't know, she didn't get the whole grasp of it, I guess. She says, oh, it's just a bunch of county people talking.
Well, the young who led the organizing effort were there, the Kingston.
Yeah.
Oh,
that-
why,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
started looking at them, thinking, can I help you? My daughter's like, I don't get it. I thought it was really emotional.
I must
bet
have
you
put it
it
in
was.
something.
I was sorry I couldn't make it just in time. But, the clerk's office too has a really nice, display. And on the second floor, Nina Prospect, she really did a good job.
I think they consolidated a bunch of different items.
Yeah.
I-
Okay, so we're just waiting on Rennie. He said he's on his way, and he's running a few minutes late. And, once he gets here, we'll start.
We're good for that. I'm hosting it, I guess.
Is the volume down now? We're not.
It's unmuted.
It is unmuted.
At least you just sent me a text, I can hear the video on my end, it looks good. Thanks, Elisa. We're good.
Is it more taken?
Yeah. Yes.
There it is.
Everything.
Okay, since we have a quorum, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today is June 15th. This is the Laws and Rules Committee meeting. And attendance in person here, we have myself, Rita Worthington, we have Alderman Carl Frankel, Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, and Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch sitting in for Alderwoman Barbara Hill. We also have our council president here, Michelle, we have our council here. And we have some visitors and guests here, so welcome. Okay, it is 6:36 and we're gonna call the meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is the rental vacancy study. And Bartek Stojan Startup is going to come up. I get it wrong. I need to just stop saying their last name. They'll come up and speak to us about that.
So, April and May of this year, my office performed a rental vacancy study. That study covered buildings built prior to 1974 with 6 or more units. And the results of that vacancy study found that the vacancy rate was at 1.57%. That is below the threshold of 5% under New York State law, meaning we can declare a housing emergency within the city of Kingston and opt into ETPA. What this means, this would mean rent stabilization for the class of buildings that were studied. It would also mean that the landlords, the property owners of those regulated buildings would also be subject to oversight from the Office of Rent Administration, meaning annual documentation of certain rents, of certain services to their tenants. Tenants in those buildings would also gain additional rights around their leases. They would have certain avenues by which to place complaints about services within their property. If we were to opt in to ETPA, a rental guidelines board would have to be created within Ulster County. Because Kingston is the only municipality that would have opted into ETPA, most likely, the composition of that board would be made up of entirely the recommendations for who should be on that board will come from the municipality, meaning Kingston. If another municipality were to opt into ETPA within Ulster County, that rent guidelines board would have to be reconstituted so that it reflects another municipality that opts in. But for now, it would be Kingston only.
May I jump in with a question?
Yes.
You just want to keep going?
Why don't we let them finish? Okay.
I note that for the rent guidelines board, there are certain requirements that we have to follow and about who is on that board. It has to be 5 public members, 2 owner representatives, and 2 tenant representatives. Overall, in terms of the process of opting into ETPA, the New York State would be involved in this process to make sure that we follow all the necessary steps once we opt in. So just to close, and I'll take questions, this will impact around 1,200 units within the county, within the city. I think the benefit to those tenants is quite important in terms of benefits that they would receive for rent stabilization. And I do urge this committee to act on the resolution for the future. And now for questions.
Okay, prior to you going, let me just, two, well, maybe not 2, but, all right, so rental study was conducted a couple of years ago, we know, right? So I want you to just explain why the city opted to do another rental study. And my second question might come to me after you answer the question.
Yeah, well, we know that whatever the results of that rental vacancy study were in 2020, we know that the housing situation in Kingston has changed significantly because of COVID-19. Anecdotally, from the first week that I was director of housing initiatives, I received phone calls from many tenants complaining about rent increases, wondering what options they have to potentially fight those increases. So it was quite clear to me that the need to perform this rental vacancy study was there. And we also had an established methodology to do so from the study that was performed 2 years ago. So it was something that my office could do without having to hire an outside consultant. And even putting aside the potential to opt into ETPA, it's good to know what exactly is happening in the rental vacancy market in Kingston, so that we can take appropriate actions, whether it's the resolution in front of you today, or other housing actions.
No, one
Yes.
other point that I think might have been in your summary, that also because of demographic shifts and movement that happened during the COVID period, it also raised some questions about whether or not the prior results might stand out.
Okay, and secondly, then, what was different about this study than what was conducted 2 years ago?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think it's very important that this came from the city of Kingston, right? It's a little bit more official, right? To see the city of Kingston letterhead, rather than seeing a consultant firm that you might not necessarily recognize, from Syracuse. So I think just the approach of doing it in-house is an important change in methodology. It means when I was following up for results or for more information, I could say I was coming from the city of Kingston, and I think there's a certain importance attached to that. The other important methodology change is that if I did not receive a response from the property owner, I assume that there were no vacancies. In some cases, I called, I followed up many times, but if I knew that the request for the survey was received because this was sent via certified mail, then I could assume once the deadline to respond passed, that there were no vacancies within the.
Okay, thank you.
So if I can add another point, I think your summary also talked about kind of secondary assessment that you made, even going beyond that assumption that there might not be any vacancies, so
yes.
maybe you could also explain that.
Right, even if I didn't receive a response past the deadline date, I didn't stop there, right? I called and followed up. In some cases, was able to reach someone affiliated with the building who could confirm that there was in fact no vacancies actually.
So safe to say you did
Yes.
due diligence?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. We'll call one and then I'll come to you, Renee.
I have 4 questions, and I can do them one at a time or all at once. People, why is Ulster County part of this conversation? Why does it have to be Ulster County? Why isn't it just City of Kingston?
That is the way that ETPA works. So for all other municipalities that have opted into ETPA, there's one county rent guidelines board. So for Westchester County, there's one county board. For Nassau County, there's one board. So that's how it works. Because we would be the first, though it would be called the Ulster County Rent Guidelines Board, it would be Kingston, yes.
Okay. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I have had multiple anxious and unhappy contacts from people at Dutch Village. And the mayor said that Dutch Village is covered by this. I want to make sure that it is and that he wasn't misinformed, so I'm not giving them misinformation, so it is covered, correct? Okay. Multiple, at least one of these people, maybe 2, are saying, my lease comes up for renewal on July 1st. What happens with these late breakers? Do we just tell them to stall for a month until it passes? Is there retroactivity to July 1st? How will it work in terms of retroactive leases?
The timing here is tricky, and the Office of Administration is going to have to guide us through that. What I do know is that if we were to opt into the DPA, there would be a process by which a fair market rent is set. And so tenants who have a rent above that would have some avenue of essentially bringing down their rent to that fair market rent. But again, that's a process that would be, but there's a process here, but it would.
So let's just say, I'm just pulling these numbers out of my thin air, you're paying $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. And the guidelines say $1,500. So they sign the lease for $2,000 and then they bring what might be called a grievance, saying this is too much based on the guidelines, I want to roll that. Is that correct? Sort of.
There's an avenue
Right.
by which to do that.
And does that include, or do we not know yet, compensation for the excess paid during the interim. I paid $1,500 in quote unquote extra rent that was beyond the guidelines. Do I get that back from the landlord? I know I'm getting kind of grand up here, but I think important to these people.
Yeah, I don't think I know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know probably shouldn't have known this, so this is my ignorance, but the maximum increase is 5%?
It would be set by the rent
So we
guidelines.
don't have that. Thank you, I'm complete. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So if I remember correctly from last time we were examining this, I think we had 30 days to recommend.
That's exactly.
Okay, okay. And I just want to say that I thought the study looked great. And from what I remember when we met with the consultants that did the study, they couldn't tell us how many doors they knocked to verify the results. So they weren't very well verified. Your study seems very well verified. Very much.
So Bartek, is there a sunset clause in the ETPA? In other words, does the ETPA mandate a certain period of time during which the emergency will hold? Or is that something that we would have to set or something that the rent board would set?
Do you mean to opt out from ETPA?
No, I mean, so, will we do another survey in 5 years? Will we always have this ETPA limit? So once we opt in, this is it for the rest of eternity?
Yes, unless the council chooses to opt out again or change the class of properties, that's right.
So I'm just wondering, could we put into the law or otherwise direct your office to take a look at this and say 3 years, 5 years, something like that?
So Barbara, you wanted to jump in?
I think that answer to your question may need, we may need a little bit more inquiry to the answer to your question.
Okay.
How frequently, the emergency has to be reassessed.
Okay, and then who decides, my understanding was that it would be the county that would choose who would be on the board, even if it's only in Kingston. And so you say there's 2 people who are tenants, 2 people who represent landlords, that leaves 1 person. And so that can be anybody that the governing legislative body decides.
Do you say, I'm sorry, can you repeat the 2
But
people?
then you said that the rent board would be 5 people.
It would be made up of, 2 tenants, 2 landlords, and 5 just regular.
So it would be 9 people. total.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and so, but would it be the Ulster County Legislature that chooses them, or at this point, would it be the county council that chooses them?
Yeah, so it would be the city, and I don't want to say exactly that would be the common council, because we have to, but it would be the city of Kingston, not the county. The county would not be involved in this one.
Okay, and then can you clarify too why there are these bizarre limits of buildings before 1974 and more than 6 units?
I think that's the way laws are made in Albany, and that's the guidelines that they set.
Yeah, that was like the one that went into effect in 1974, so that was the date.
Right, but in New York City, right? So ETP is based on New York City.
Exactly, yes. And so when it was expanded, they used the same guidelines.
Okay, and then this will only apply to those same buildings. It's not just that the test is done on those particular buildings and it applies to all units. It's only going to apply to those units.
Exactly.
Can you tell us what percentage of the total number of rental units this represents then?
It's probably under 10%, but I would have to do some digging to get the exact figure.
Okay, but it's not the majority at least.
Yeah, and
It's a,
yeah, and I might want to get back to your question.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Andrea?
I just actually wanted to follow up a couple of questions from what Rita was asking. I appreciate all the follow-up you were doing, Bartek, when you didn't hear back. Do you know a rough idea of the estimate of, or the percentage of property owners that didn't respond and that you had to do that for? I mean, we're talking 50%, or we're talking 10%, or, again, rough, not putting you on the spot unless you want more
Right,
time.
so I would say about a third responded to the survey that was sent in some format, and about 2/3 required additional follow-up from me.
And out of that 2/3, did you hear eventually get the majority of that
Yes.
2/3?
Yes, especially for the larger properties such as, Stony Run or Dutch Village. Those are the ones that I wanted to make sure, I could get an accurate count for.
And you send out certified mail to
Exactly.
every land
Yes,
that landowner, that are property owner that would be under this.
correct,
Okay. So that you knew that they received it.
exactly.
Sure.
What is do you think if you earned, and I'm quite sure that 1.4% is not precisely accurate, it can't be. You think you earned on the low side or the high side? What was your best guess? Is it actually lower than 1.4% or higher? I'm confident it's below 5%.
I think it's actually an accurate representation. It might even, the actual vacancy rate might actually be lower, just based on,
I wouldn't be at all surprised. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
And if people aren't answering, you have to make an inference about what that means, which is where things get a little skewed.
But at the same time, I think I read in the study that even if those landlords, if you had heard back from them, that the vacancy rate still would have been well below the 5%.
yes. So there are certain properties in which the certified mail came back. And I was not able to verify, by calling or by doing site visits, what the vacancy rate was in those buildings. But yes, even if the vacancy was, even if those buildings were 100% occupied, the vacancy rate would still be under the 5% threshold.
And this, I know, I'm more repeating because I'm reading the chat. So this is for, what, like 10% of land's property owners. It's for just the large landowners, not property owners, can't get that word right, and not the small ones.
Right, you have to have 6 or more units.
6 or more units.
Yes.
Just clarifying that.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Well, Bartek, let me thank you very much for all of the work that you put into this. I know it was long and tedious. And so I appreciate how you doing your due diligence on all of this. Sounds like, it does sound like an accurate study based on all of the work that you and your team did. So with that in mind, I'm going to call for a motion. Motion by Michelle Hirsch, second by Renee Scott Childress. Any discussion? No, not hearing any further, just, yes, sir.
I'm not sure if this is the best place to put it, but I would like to somehow acknowledge that it would be important for us to review the numbers at some period, whether it's 3 years or 5 years. Because, are you sure that it doesn't say anything in the TPA about, reviewing it periodic intervals? Or
I can certainly confirm with the Office of Rent Administration tomorrow.
I appreciate that. And then, just so that maybe
And I'll communicate.
at the council meeting, we can add something in, if that's okay.
Okay.
And if people agree, that's okay.
Anything further? All right, so let's call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. No opposers. All right, so this resolution does pass out of committee. And then we'll go into the full council with our recommendation to say yes. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, whenever your name comes up, it's followed by somebody saying, he's doing such a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Second item on our agenda is the ethics code review, and Alan Ace is going to come up and talk to us about that. Come on up, sir. Sorry. Spell your name correctly. One L? Yeah. Okay. Okay, you're up now.
I believe that everybody received the letter.
Yes.
And so that's the third approach, the common council on that topic.
The third one.
The third approach, the third time. First time, the ethics board voted on presenting it, asking for a review and consideration on whether or not we wanted to revise it. And while it was waiting to be reviewed, a couple members of the ethics board moved off the board. And corporation counsel at that conference said not to review it, I guess, to the common council, not to review it because we didn't have a quorum. Although the quorum had voted on submitting the letter. So we resubmitted it in the summer of last year. And then we did a video, and everyone was on that, this committee at that time. So we presented that this committee's Zoom meeting. And then it didn't move anywhere and there was no response to it. And there was a changing of personnel in the common council and election. So the alderman at large was able to present it again to this committee. And basically what it says, what the request is that you consider reviewing the document to make sure that the code says what you want it to say, and to understand what the terminology actually means. In the letter that I submitted to you, it talks about, what a reasonable person may assume that it says it means, and then what it actually means, which may be something different. So we've had cases for review where people, there've been, we get some feedback at times that not necessarily popular, that we must be working for the council, or the mayor, or a corporation council. And we work for nobody, we're an independent committee. We make the decisions the best we can with our council's advice, whether it's corporation council or outside council. So some of the areas are, in the first sentence, or in the beginning of the code, it talks about an action by a public official that benefits or may benefit. And we had a case that we needed outside counsel on, and this is their specialty area, and it came back that what an action means by a public official. And according to the court determinations, an action by a public official is something that they can plan and implement themselves without approval of others. So if one of you were to say, we're going to do this, and we're going to create a new department, and you're going to put me as the superintendent of that department, that would seem a little funny to him. He'd do it because I'm in his ward, of course, but which he wouldn't. But had he done that, would that be an ethical violation? And it wouldn't, because he could not create a department. He could not. That would have to go through the common council and have the approval and budget and all of that. And he couldn't point me to that position. It would most likely be a civil service position that would have to go through them. So he wouldn't have the ability to do that on his own. And there's a slew of other areas in there where those same concerns come in. If there were complaints that were made against the mayor, or said we wanted outside counsel, because corporation counsel is representing one of the players, the mayor, the alderman at large, or some member of the common council as their primary person to represent. Is there a conflict with them then being our legal representative? We share with them everything that we're looking at, and they give us advice. Is it in the best advice of the people, or is it in the best advice of the person they're representing?
Can I just step in for 1 second? I want to say 2 quick things. One, I haven't reviewed this, and we haven't talked about it yet, but also, as a corporation counsel, I don't represent any one individual, I represent the city always.
The city. Right, well, and historically, that's been explained as the city, the mayor is the primary person that they would represent. So if that has changed, then that's fine.
That's in the charter. I always represent the city. I serve at the pleasure of the mayor. If the mayor wanted to dismiss me, he has that authority in the charter, but my dedication is always to the city, not simply to the mayor, not simply to the council.
So we could run into a problem, say there was a complaint against the mayor. And we wanted to get outside counsel. Normally, we would need the mayor's approval to do that,
To get outside counsel.
to get out. There's an allowance for outside counsel, but we would need his approval to.
Just to expend the funds.
Right.
Look, the reason I'm looking cross-eyed is because if he is the subject of an ethics charge, I would think he would have to recuse himself from that decision.
And I'm sure he would.
Yeah.
So, right, and that might go to the alderman at large. However, if the alderman at large were to be one of the complainants in that case, then what? And it doesn't necessarily guide you on that. So.
So there's no succession after the alderman.
Back to the alderman at large. So we would implement what would be a normal succession, or try to anyway, we would go to the majority leader. But if that majority leader was also part of the complaint process, we would then go to the minority leader. Which I don't know about now, but last year didn't exist. So we just some things to look at. We learn as we go, Nothing's been, not indicating that something is amiss here. Just that we might want to review this and make sure that it says what we want to say.
So, excuse, this is a night. So what is it exactly that you want from the common council? Because it sounds like this revisiting of the ethics code is something that's really is in corporation council daily work, right? No?
We're told that it comes from the common council.
But we're really down into the nitty gritty. Like you're giving multiple facts, situations, and there are probably 50 more that we could come up with.
Oh, yeah.
Are we expected to come up with some sort of Napoleonic code that covers all the instances? I mean, what is it that you want from us?
That would be delightful. However,
Not for us.
it would be delightful, however, it's not reasonable.
Right.
Any changes to the code would have to go through charter revision, I'm assuming. And so.
We were told that it would have to go to a common council. And they would they would review it and any changes. Now, that may, I would suspect that it should go also to corporation council as the city's attorney at that point. But for you guys, since it is your code, to review it and become comfortable with it, know what it is, and decide if that is what it is. I'm not telling you to revise it. I'm asking you to review it and consider if it's saying exactly what you mean.
But it seems that when you bring up 2 specific things.
Well, that's just an example of what an action is and then how you would access outside counsel.
Right, so those 2 things are, one is developing a clearer sense of who takes responsibility for the ethics board accessing its outside counsel allowance and coming up with a process as clear as possible that can take into account conceivable situations. And we do have some history here, so we can look at that history and think that through.
Right. And to be honest, most things can be resolved by the ethics board meeting with the corporation council.
Sure, but the problem is there are times when that doesn't work, right? So it's good to have some clarity as much as we can foresee, right? So based on some recent-ish history, well, actually, this code only goes back 10 years.
Yeah.
So, we could look at that period of time and see, okay. And then the other thing has to do with discussing what the ethics rules actually establish as ethical errors. So there are unethical, what is established as an unethical action? And so you're saying that the word action doesn't necessarily have the popular definition of action, that we should look at revising the ethics code so that it's clear either that we mean somebody can only be brought up or be convicted of an ethics violation if they do something that they have specific power to do, or, and this is where I'm clear, as it's been discussed, could we determine that some actions are unethical if they have the appearance of being unethical?
I think how you write that out would be important.
Right, but so that's what I'm trying to come down, because we're not necessarily talking about issues of specific state, federal, or city law, right? We're talking about what we deem to be unethical behavior. And I'm sure there's best practices, so we can talk with the New York Conference of Mayors, who has people who discuss this and are experts on municipal ethics codes. I'm just trying to tease out a little bit more what the problem is, so that we're clearer when we go before them or ask questions.
What do you want it to mean? Because I also would not want it to be teased out so shallow, if you would, that people in the normal course of business get caught up in an ethical, because nobody wants that. The ethics board doesn't want that. And or what about areas that might be problematic from an ethical perspective, but have done no harm? And would education on that be better than, the punitive, you've been found, guilty or substantiated violation of the ethical code, and because that becomes more punitive then. And the present board is very much in favor of education and like to educate people and to avoid ethical violations. And if people are approaching them, or they got their toe on the line, or they're making a mistake, to bring that to their attention rather than bring them in for a hearing, which no one, anyone who would like to come in for a hearing, or bringing them in is not a lot of fun.
Yes.
Since I haven't seen what your recommendations are, do they include an education requirement for members of the ethics board on ethical standards as set forth under?
They do not. There should be, I think there should be some. I'm obligated to get them, not for the city, but for my license, and I've had members of the ethics board, there's college level ethics courses available for free that they can get online. So we've had some of them, I've done them, and some of the others I've done them, and I would recommend them. But one of our persons is an educator, and what came out is that we'd also like to see some preventive stuff. So when people, and I know people sign a paper that says, oh yeah, I read the ethics code, but if there could be, nobody did. I mean, very few. Because those are papers that we get in a lump, and
Absolutely.
so that there be some training maybe at higher during an orientation and annually, that we just update it, remind them of it. So those are some of the areas. Others are, there's an allowance for a civil penalty to be assigned, up to $10,000.
It's statutory? Where is that
It's in the code.
in the code?
And I met with the mayor on this, and there's a problem with it. One, nobody wants to give up any money, but and we don't want to take anybody's money and that, we can educate rather than civil penalties are fine, basically. What it doesn't say is what happens with that money. So we fine somebody or civil penalty is assessed for $100 or $1,000. Who collects it? Who collects that money? Where does it go? And what's it used for? And someone may know, but I don't. I met with the mayor and he wasn't aware.
Have you studied other municipalities' ethics codes or, done any comparative?
I've looked at some of them, and there's often not those nuances of what's gonna happen to the money, if there's gonna be a separate account. But that would be something that the city would need to determine. We have no interest in assigning civil penalties to people who are working and trying to help the city. I mean, and they make a mistake and assign a penalty to them. That's not our interest. Our interest is to really educate people so that they move away from what might be a violation. Or be aware of it and go ahead and do it.
Well, it really doesn't really say it's required for the fine, right? The ethics board has to come up with the punitive, not the number and all of that, right? That's correct, right?
It's in the city of Kingston code. I don't know.
It just says
that it's
like up to
mandatory.
$10,000.
Right, so we could make up,
So you could say.
that's a lot
$5.
of leeway. We can make up a number and say, I mean, imagine if you received a letter saying that you've been assessed a civil penalty for $10,000.
I wonder if I deserved it. Seriously, that level?
No, I think that would be problematic for most.
Yeah, I think so. But I keep coming back to a fundamental concern that I have. And that is that what I hear you saying, you're giving lots of examples, it's clearly a documented process with a lot of empty space still. What I hear you saying, perhaps incorrectly, is saying, we need the common council to flesh this out. And that comes to me, and this is why at the federal level and at the state level, you have legislative staff. This is ethics code sausage making. We don't have capacity, as far as I'm concerned, in the common council to make this kind of sausage. So my question becomes, we're either going to do it, or my thought is, we're either going to do a quarter-assed job, or we're going to have to get somebody else to fill in the blanks, because I don't know if we may have the expertise, but I kind of doubt that we have the time and practical capacity to actually do the A+ job I think we'd all aspire to do. Do you have any response to that, or does anybody?
That's why we would rely on NICOM.
So there is
Or I was gonna say corporation counsel too, I mean, if she hasn't looked at it, maybe start there.
I would start with
And it's,
corporation council.
that's who we would rely on.
I'm sorry?
That's who we
Make sure you
would
get it.
rely on is the lawyers and, if we want, NICOM is a service that we can use.
Okay.
And I think we could do a good job, and it is our responsibility to then pass it, and so it is on our table.
And I think you're right about the, it's an attorney or a lawyer's purview, because when we read the code and we're looking at a case, the initial response, the initial reaction may be one way. And everybody says, oh, that's not a violation, or that's clearly an ethical violation. But when you look at it from a legal perspective, it may or may not be so, or it may be completely opposite. Yes, I don't like that. I think that's wrong, but it does not violate the code according to the law. So, and I'm not saying to change it.
I understand.
I'm asking you to review it and make sure it says what you want it to say.
So let me ask you, Alan, so in past practices, when an ethics complaint was brought before the board, did you involve board counsel?
Yes.
Well, that would still be the same path going forward.
Yeah, no. The corporation counsel is our legal advisor,
Mhm.
our first step of legal advisor.
Mhm.
2 times over the last 5 years or whatever it was, could be wrong on the number of years, being isolated for a couple threw me off. But we've had outside counsel. One was a volunteer and one was paid. One we were able to borrow from a local municipality who offered their services. Because there was thought to be a conflict with corporation counsel representing the city or some of the people in it. And corporation counsel thought that might also be a conflict or perceived as a conflict.
Okay. Michelle, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that, I mean, that's our role as, you know, council legislators.
I've been here for 6
To-
months and
yeah.
based on my experience, diving deep into the engine is not what the common council has done. I've not experienced doing a whole lot of that, that's all it is.
No, I couldn't, and I hear what you're saying, the whole common council talking about it, or even a committee, but someone reviewing it, and is this what we wanted to say?
I also want to say just, I'm trained as a lawyer. I kind of know what this works. It's a pain in the ass and it's detailed one word, a lot of it. And it's painful and I don't know how many lawyers are on common council. I'm not going to hold myself out as a lawyer on this job. I think we need legal expertise who are willing, who have the sitzfleisch to sit down and make a good one. And that's, I honestly, I'm full of aspirations for the common council, but I don't know if this is the best home to expect a great outcome.
Well, I think you have
We have it.
expert legal,
Yeah.
you know.
We did.
Point is, we have to rely on corporation council or some other council of support if we, I don't think, we need help on this, that's all I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm saying.
But I think what we have been informed of for the last couple of years has been that it rests with common council.
Ultimately, yes, totally.
And so there was, quite honestly, some misunderstanding about, in common council a while ago about how the ethics board was manned, how appointees were there, what they were doing, if there was, you know, a quorum, if there was and, you know, if things were happening. And so, you know, our things have some transparency, as much as possible, so that there's some clarity in the guidance documents that we use, which is the code, and where that leads us to. And to make sure that it's what the representatives of the people of the city of Kingston want for their employees, for themselves, for their leadership.
I'm just gonna throw out a couple ideas for paths forward. I mean, I think, first of all, corporation council should be, you know, read through some of this, and then I don't know if that, it starts with corporation council and the ethics board, or if it starts with corporation council and the committee. Or if you would recommend that maybe, or the council or the committee wants to just start with NICOM doing a presentation on it, or those are some of the paths that I'm seeing. I don't know if anybody has any other, and if you would like to jump in.
Sure, NICOM doesn't write code, but they certainly can share examples in case law that might be useful as the council comes up with its policy preferences. At the same time, NICOM does not write code. And I think that some of the issues that I'm hearing are touching on matters that maybe we've talked about in the past, but there's a lot more to do, whether it's also thinking about the education and issues for the ethics board, if we're going to be doing some reform of matters within the ethics board's purview. This might be a moment to talk about even things like the disclosure form. And
Yes.
try to come up with something comprehensive instead of doing a piecemeal sort of Band-Aid approach. I think there are a lot of issues to think about with the disclosure process and making it actually do what our code intends as opposed to befuddle, which I think it kind
It
of
does.
is befuddling.
Yes, and
And so if you think it would be useful to have, for example, an ad hoc committee, which you have the power to create, maybe that's the right place to start, to at least come up with an agenda, gather for the key issues that need reform over time, you know, need to be looked at in a comprehensive way. Gather resources, both what we already have and can bring to the process from my office and maybe some other resources that might also illuminate our path forward. But I do think that it's a long process that has to happen in order to do it properly and address all of the issues brought up today and others that are not brought up today.
And the disclosure forms, same thing. People do not want to fill them out. They think it's too invasive. Ask questions that aren't quite necessary. And that's in the letter also about the disclosure. The only thing I think that wasn't in the letter is the thing about the civil penalties and what does that mean? What would happen with them? And are they real? Because we can send somebody a letter. You've been assessed a civil penalty, and they can just ignore it. I mean, yeah, would. But yeah, and you know, the ethics board would love to be involved in a discussion about where they see the concerns or the issues, and it isn't our role to say what it should be, or what it must be, but to point out, if this is what it is, here's some of what it means, and this might be some of the problems that we've run into with that section of the code.
So the idea of a special committee, is that what the board would be in favor of, something like that, and just start doing the hard work?
That probably would make sense because I don't see the entire common council digging into this. What do you think?
I think it's probably the best way to go. I think it's gonna take a long time to come up with something, and I think it requires a level of expertise that we don't possess in-house, with the possible exception of public.
Well,
So-
any committee that you put together, a special committee that you will be working in tandem with the court council, as well as with the ethics board. And so, I mean, tonight, what I'm hearing you asking us to do is review this code, right? To take care of any there you go.
Yeah.
So I don't know what action, I don't know if there's any kind of, committee report or anything like that will come out of that. No, you're just asking us
To review it.
to review it.
And the letter points out some of the concerns that have arisen
Yeah.
over.
Now, will you be sending us, any other questionable things that you want us to take a look at? Or do you specifically want us to go through the code and pull out what we think needs to be changed and or corrected?
Well, we've mentioned those. We can have a meeting of the ethics board again, and this Barbara Sarah, she's on that.
Oh, I know.
Hello.
And see if there's additional items. But in general, we would just want it to be reviewed and to see if it's actually saying and doing what we want it to do. And our hope is that it could become more educational so that people get an education, not that they don't get the descriptor, the paper describing the ethics code. But I know whenever I've started a new job and they give me 150 papers to sign, I just sign them and I'll look at them later. Seldom do. Where are they? Well, back in the car. So, so that they're comfortable with it, they understand it, whatever it turns out to be.
Okay.
And I do agree that it's gonna take time to get it to say what you want.
Mhm.
We have legal leadership that is experienced in this area. So,
How impressive it would be for the city to have their elected representatives really look at what the code is, instead of just making it another paper. And it could be teaching the community something too.
and helping the employees so that they don't learn more about it when a complaint is filed against them. We have good employees, we have a lot of good people working in the city and volunteering. So, just want to have a good experience.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'm not gonna say it.
thank you.
What's the big deal?
Okay. Before we go to this last one, I realized I didn't read the actual committee report for the vacancy study.
Yeah, why don't you review that and we can do.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go back.
Education.
I don't believe I read it.
No, you didn't read it.
You didn't read it, so.
Is that required?
Yeah, it's probably best that
Yeah,
you read it.
all right, so let me just go back and read it. So this is a resolution to declare a housing emergency based on the results of the rental vacancy study conducted by the city of Kingston, which would allow the city to opt into the TPA. Sound reasonable?
Do we need
Yes.
to revote now that you read it or not?
I mean, is there any harm? Is anybody going to change?
I move that I move that
Do I need to change the names out here now?
Yeah.
Motion.
Good. Person,
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you. My apologies for that, I just,
Well, nobody else noticed it, so.
yeah,
it's on all of them.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's really important to the community.
yeah, you're right. All right, so, this third item agenda, policy for scattering ashes. I think Elisa has asked us to table this.
That's correct.
Just one bit of information before, since it's tabled, but probably before your next meeting, I'll be able to circulate to all our complaints and those issues.
Okay, great. So that does it then, that's the end of our agenda. Anyone have anything they want to?
Well, do you want to establish a committee regarding the ethics review right now, or?
Well, I heard two voices say that they would be in favor of doing that.
Yeah.
Would you be in favor of that? I mean, not saying that you would be on it, but just, and we could discuss how it actually works. So that's the plan, moving forward as a subcommittee, a special committee. I will talk to folks, see who would be interested, and come up with, keep you informed, and move forward with that.
Okay,
All right?
great. All right, so, that does it, we're finished. Any motion to adjourn? And Scott Childress, second by Carl Frankel, let's go.
Thank you.
We are adjourned,
Well, that's fun.
7:29.
The city limits.
Thank you.
Thank you.